Hey Gator fans. So last Thursday, the SEC revealed the schedule for all 16 teams in the conference. And by the looks of it, it seems that Florida may have gotten unusually the better end of a deal here. The schedule, along with the rest of the SEC, was announced and revealed last Thursday, and the look of it has Florida fans optimistic. The Gators will be playing a 9 conference game schedule in coordination with the SEC's new 366 schedule model. Remember, every team in the SEC over the next 4 years is going to play each other at least twice, and each pair of teams will have a home and home series with each other. So Florida's and what they mean is 3 annual opponents yearly for the next 4 years, and then whatever 6 opponents you don't face in 2026, you'll face them in 2027, and you'll just keep that rotation going through 2029, and the home and away games will be inverted outside of your neutral site matchups. So Florida's annual opponents for the next 4 years are Georgia, Kentucky, and South Carolina. The other 6 games in conference play Florida will be having will be Auburn, Ole Miss, Missouri, South Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt. And then, of course, they finish. And then you have your outside conference games, in which the first two out of conference games. Excuse me, I couldn't get my words right. Out of conference games will be to start the season with Florida Atlantic and the Florida Atlantic Owls and the Campbell Camels, and then you got your annual end of the year rivalry with in-state nemesis the Seminoles. And the Georgia game will not be played in Jacksonville because the Jaguar Stadium is getting renovated. It will be in Atlanta this year, and the next year it will be in Tampa, Florida. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down the games that are coming along. So the first 2 games, like I said, will be against Florida Atlantic and Campbell. And while playing 2 non-Power 4 opponents to start the season sounds appealing, but it didn't go so well for Florida last year, this past regular season. I know obviously that was with a different coach, but still, it's not obvious. We found out it's not as well. It's never been guaranteed, but we found out the hard way this year, unfortunately. Contrary to the new coach, John Summerall, Billy Napier, who was the previous coach, in his first 2 games that Florida played against then Pac-12 team Utah and then Kentucky. So, and if you look at Billy Napier, every single season Billy Napier had, well, except for last year, he either started against either Miami or Utah, and then the following week he would get a non-power Power 4 school, Sanford and McNeese. But in year 2, he got Utah and Kentucky, as I just said. So going 2-0 has kind of been a hard thing for Florida to achieve because, well, they've had tougher opponents in their first 2 games of the year, unlike a lot of the teams in the SEC. A lot of SEC teams usually prefer to get an FCS matchup or a Group of 5 matchup in late August or early September to get the bugs out of their system before they get into conference play. So if John Summerall, as expected, were to go 2-0 this year with the first 2 games with Florida Atlantic and Campbell, at least you could say he did something that Billy Napier couldn't do. So that is an improvement one way or another. And then once you get outside of those first 2 games, that's when you begin your conference play. Florida will be on the road at Auburn. Then they will come home to host Ole Miss. Then they'll travel to Columbia, Missouri, that is, to play the Missouri Tigers. Then they'll come back home to the Swamp to play the other team out of Columbia, South Carolina, that is. And then they're going to visit Texas in Austin, and then they're going to head into the bye week. After the bye week, they got, of course, Georgia, as usual. And then after the Georgia game, they're going to get Oklahoma, and this will be the first time in college football history that Oklahoma will be on the road to play in Gainesville in the Swamp. Now, these 2 teams have met before in bowl games. Oklahoma played Florida in the Cotton Bowl in 2020, destroyed Florida in that game. And Oklahoma has played the Gators before in the state of Florida. That was in the 2008 National Championship game in Hard Rock, at what was then Dolphin Stadium, but is now known as Hard Rock Stadium, when Florida beat Oklahoma. So there is big history between these two programs, but it will be the first time the Gators will ever host the Oklahoma Sooners. And then after the Oklahoma game, Florida will finish their final 3 games against Kentucky. Then they'll have senior day against Vanderbilt, and then they'll go on the road at Florida State. So which are the games that stand out in my opinion? I think, to me, playing Auburn on the road for a new coach that's making his debut in conference play, and for Gator fans that are around my age or a bit younger that probably don't know about this, Auburn and Florida was one of the biggest rivalries in the SEC from the I believe it was like the 1940s till about the 1990s, and then when the SEC went to 12 teams and they split the conference into the East and West divisions, that took away the annual Florida and Auburn matchup. But there's been some big rivalry games, a few top 10 matchups, top ranked matchups between the Auburn Tigers and the Gators. So it's a renewal of an old rivalry that has kind of gone away, like a lot in college football. It will be the first time the Gators will be on the road in Auburn since 2011, and I think having to play Auburn on the road because of that rivalry matchup and the unfamiliarity that a lot of the players have with the crowd noise that comes with Auburn, because Auburn is they're one of the tougher road environments in the conference for a team to play in. Jordan-Hare Stadium can get really, 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 really loud. Like, it's very underrated how tough Auburn can be on the road if they just had some good teams to go. If they had some good teams to host them, Auburn's been bad for a while, so it's like you don't really get to see what a good Auburn team at home can really look like. That to me is the biggest road game in my eyes. It's and you go to another road game to me that could be potentially really, really, really tricky, I think, is on the road at Missouri. Florida has had a bad history of tough or close losses in Missouri. 2023 was the closest one of them all. A 4th and 17. If Florida stops Missouri on a 4th and 17, they win in that game. 2021, they go to overtime, losing that one. 2017, lose in that game. 2014, I believe. No, 2013, they get beat down by what was a good Missouri team. So playing on the road at Missouri has been tricky for the Gators, and since the Tigers have been in the conference, and it has not been an easy out. Though I will say I do like the prospect of seeing Missouri a little bit now than compared to when the schedule was revealed, because it turns out that Kirby Moore, who was the offensive coordinator for Mizzou, is leaving to take the head coaching job in Washington State. And Kirby Moore was a godsend for Eli Drinkwitz and the Missouri program, because when he arrived, he gave the offense the jump that they needed, because they already had good defensive players, but they didn't have the offense to match it. And Missouri really took off over the next few years because of that. Multiple double-digit win records. They had an 8-4 record this year, so losing Kirby Moore as the offense coordinator is going to hurt Mizzou. But Eli Drinkwitz has done a pretty good job recruiting and building the program there, and they're going to be a very tough out. They're still going to be a very tough out even without Kirby Moore. To me, the toughest stretch of the schedule for Florida is when they play Texas, Georgia, and Oklahoma in the span of 4 weeks. They have a bye week in between. Speaking of bye weeks, there's no more 2 bye weeks in this season. The SEC got rid of that. They're going back to a regular 13-week schedule. No more 14-week schedules with an extra bye week. No, they're just going to 13 weeks for each team, and every team's only going to have 1 bye week. So that's another change that I noticed when the schedule came out. The softest stretch of the schedule, in my opinion, is where Florida will end their last 3 games against Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Florida State. Kentucky, new coaching staff, no more Mark Stoops. They brought in Will Stein, who was the offensive coordinator from Oregon. They're bringing him down. Then they're going to hire as the head coach. They're going to hire Jay Bateman, the former Texas A&M defensive coordinator. He's going to be joining him in Lexington. And Florida has had bad issues with Jay Bateman as a defensive coordinator. When you look at their games against Texas A&M and the last 2 seasons, but I will say Kentucky's not going to have the talent that Texas A&M typically accumulates, so that maybe Florida gets a little leeway in that regard. But we get to see Jay Bateman again, which is fantastic. Vanderbilt I think this potential Vanderbilt could definitely have a drop off. Going from two, they were 10-2 this year. Diego Pavia was a Heisman finalist. He's not going to be able to play any more games. He's played out all of his eligibility. No more Diego Pavia, and not just losing Diego Pavia from an on-field perspective, but the mentality that he brought to that locker room. It's not going to be the same. The leadership's going to be different. The tenacity and the confidence is not going to be at the same level in the Vandy locker room as it was this past year. No more Diego Pavia for that. Clark Lee has beaten Florida before in 2022 without Diego Pavia, so certainly not overlooking Clark Lee at all. He's done a pretty good and respectable job at Vandy. Vanderbilt has unfortunately been closer to a college football playoff than Florida, which is inexcusable in my opinion as a Gator fan, but that's the reality that we're in. And then after those two games, you end your season with Florida State like always. I said it before, Mike Norvell's on his last legs in Tallahassee. They're going to get rid of him. They just kept him around this year so they could lower the buyout. He has just been terrible throughout practically all of his time in Florida State. Yes, he had a nice 2-year run, but outside of that, his records outside of the 2-year run that he had is 3-6, 5-7, 2-10, and 5-7 again. So when he's bad, he's not even like a little bit bad. He's like flat out terrible. He's lost 17 games over the last 2 years. Has not won outside of Doak Campbell Stadium since the ACC championship game against Louisville. Lost at Georgia in the Orange Bowl. Lost to Georgia Tech in Ireland. Has not won a true road game over the last 2 years, and has gone 0-6 winless against FSU's 3 biggest rivals: Miami, Florida, and Clemson. So not really not a good time right now in Tallahassee, whether football or basketball, because they just lost to UMass yesterday on the men's basketball court. But we're going to stick to football here. That to me is the softest stretch of the Gator schedule. One benefit of the schedule is that Florida does not play Alabama, Tennessee, or Texas A&M this year, or what was an improved Mississippi State team. I thought Mississippi State looks pretty good this year, even though the record wouldn't give you the right idea. But the fact that you avoid those teams this year when you normally just get lambasted with very good SEC contenders, in some cases national title contenders outside of the conference play, if you include Miami or the Pac-12 teams that Billy Napier played in the early part of his tenure, that's a good factor. That I think a good advantage for the Florida Gators heading into 2026. So we'll see where that goes. I'm not going to make a record prediction yet. I only do those when it gets to like summertime. But those are my thoughts on the schedule. You already heard the opponents: FAU, Campbell, Auburn, Missouri, South Carolina, Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Florida State, in that order. John Summerall is going to be starting his tenure in Gainesville. I hope I can make it to the Florida Atlantic game, because normally I wanted another game that wasn't Group of 5 or FCS like when I went to Sanford 2 years ago. But being that it's John Summerall's first game, I want to get a feel for how his team is going to look in his opening debut. So that's really it. Thank you for listening.